Alright, what's up guys? Welcome back to Game Education. In this video, we're gonna have a look at A phase and deployment. And basically, recently someone asked me, what do we need to look at when we look at the deck builder and we decide which units we're going to bring in A phase for our deployment or for deployment and for A phase. And I think it's a good question. This is a quite a complex game, and putting the two aspects of the game together, which are the deck building and the actual fighting itself, they are, let's say, inextricably intertwined. So one does complement the other, and one does drag the other down if it's weak. So if you're not actually good at understanding where to place your units and how to move them, then it doesn't matter how good your deck build is, because that is the, let's say, the weak link in your chain. And correspondingly on the other side, even if you understand really well where to place your units, how to move them, how to use them together, if you're using an absolutely terrible deck, it won't matter really how good you can move the units if your deck just can't um, give you the things you need at that point in time. So what we'll do is we'll have a look at maybe one or two, maybe three different divisions and their decks, and we'll have a look at, when we look at the deck building screen and the unit cards that are available, how many we can have for the different unit types, what we can think about for these things, and how it can relate also to the income types, and then deciding, which units we will absolutely need in A phase and what units we won't need or might not need, but also then what that will mean for us when we actually play the game. So if I just have a quick scroll for a division to have a look at first, let's, for no particular reason, let's look at Gruppe Harteneck. So even on this part here, like when there's no units, this tells us a lot about this division, even when we don't see the units they have. And what I mean by that is, we look at how many cards of each unit type of the division can bring. So when we look at this, okay, and you can try this for yourself, okay? When I look at this, I see three things immediately. The first thing that pops into my mind are three things, okay? Now you have a look and think about what those three things might be, okay? Just take a second. Okay, so the three things that pop into my mind here are that the infantry tab is really big. The air tab is also really big. That means these are probably this division's strengths, okay? Really long infantry tab means we can bring a lot of infantry. Potentially we can also up vet our infantry to have stronger infantry. And the same for the air tab. Um, Although we don't want to up vet our air units most of the time. I'm not going to get into the explanation why I just don't do it. And then the third thing is that the anti-air tab is really small. And that means that I'm not going to have much anti-air. We're not going to be able to have much anti-air. And so potentially it also means that if we do want to destroy enemy planes, we might have to rely more on our own fighters to do so. Fortunately, we have, a strong air tab to do that. So that's okay. That kind of shores up that weakness, although fighters are not a replacement for anti-air. So then if we want to think about, what we are going to bring in A phase, I think really the first thing to think about is how many points are we going to have to spend. Now, in standard deployment, that's 750 points, but then we also have to take into account that the units we buy and place in deployment come from our A phase supply, and A phase is also another 10 minutes long after the deployment, to which we also gain points. Now, if we're looking at, let's say, the balanced income, we'll get 110 points per minute. So throughout all of A phase, that'll be 1,100. That's some quick maths. So then 750, 1,100, we will need a total of 1,850 points minimum to buy in a phase. Now, does that mean that we should completely balance 1,850 points of units? No, that's actually a bad idea because, as I've talked about in other videos, generally we want more units than we will actually use at any one time. And the reason for that is, I mean, especially if we're playing in a more lower level and less very specific strategy or style, the reason for that is that every situation, every match is going to be different. It's going to be played on different maps, probably. And so every time you play a match, even if it's on the same map against the same opponent, even, different things will happen, and you will want different units at different times to counter different things that happen. And so if we are very limited in the units we have available, then that's going to restrict our options to respond to things. And we don't want that. We want to have more things available than we actually need. And that way, depending on what happens, if A happens, we have B. If C happens, we have D. If E happens, but we do not have F, then our opponent has an advantage. That's a problem for us. So we want to have more than 1,850 points. So probably we're looking at least 2,000 points. Now that's just in a purely statistical, mathematical sense. If we think of it in more practical terms, in terms of what do we do when we actually try to build a deck? Now, in my last video where I looked at combined arms, you can have a look at that if you like. I talked about infantry being kind of the skeleton of our Frankenstein's monster. Not an amazing analogy, I know, but it is what it is. So when I build a deck, the first thing I would do is go to the infantry tab. And especially for a division like Gruppe Harteneck that has such a long and bountiful, shall we say, infantry tab, is probably a good place to start. Now, there are two things that I always want to bring, or let's say if we're thinking in basic terms, okay? Because I know when you get to the higher levels of gameplay, when you really understand the game well, you can fine tune and you can make a lot of exceptions in your deck building because you know how to overcome these weaknesses. So that being something different, if we look at the basics, we will always need line infantry and we will always need CQC infantry. Now, someone also recently asked, what is line infantry? You say line infantry and I do not see any lines. So you're a liar. There are no infantry with lines in this game. Bad joke, I'm sorry. By line infantry, I mean infantry like the Grenadier DP here. And we recognize line infantry basically because they have mostly rifles and hopefully a light machine gun or an automatic rifle. And these guys have the DP-28. The Ersatztruppen would also be classified as rifle infantry or as line infantry. They're not amazing because they are disheartened troops, so they take 50% extra suppression damage. They don't have any machine gun. They just have those rifles, 9-man squad. The strength comes from being only 15 points and having a quantity of 18 available for one card in a phase. So you can, if you know how to support these troops well, you can use these as your line infantry. But I'd say they're a little bit more complex than just using standard infantry. So standard line infantry. We've got some Grenadier DP here. If we have a look at, say, the Stoßtrupp, these are not line infantry. They have submachine guns and Molotov cocktails. These are our CQC infantry, great at very short range. We want to use these in heavy forests, in towns where buildings and other things can obstruct line of sight. down to 100 meters, and we see here the range both for the submachine guns and for the Molotov cocktails. They are both 100 meters, and so that's where we want to use them. Using them outside of that range, if we try to use them um, in longer ranges, then line infantry can engage these infantry at 300 meters, 400, 500, 750 meters, and these guys will not be able to fire back, so they'll be taking damage without being able to return any. This is very inefficient, and that's good for your opponent. You're giving your opponent an advantage when you enable them to do that. So this kind of infantry, just when we can get that 100-meter range, they work really well. So then we have some other things, right Jaeger. Now, if you're a new player, have a look at the weapons on this squad and tell me, this infantry squad, is it CQC or is it line? Have a look at the weapons there. What do you think? So if you answered CQC infantry, you would be correct. There are 9 submachine guns here and only 3 rifles. They do have rifles, okay, but only 3 of them. You imagine now this squad trying to have a 500-meter fight against, say, the Grenadier DP. You've got 3 rifles versus 7 rifles, and also a light machine gun. This right Jaeger squad is going to lose that fight every single time, even if it does have 12 men compared to the Grenadier DP's 9. So that's how we look at these troops and we recognize this basic difference: close range or long range. Now there are a unit or an infantry unit type that is actually in the middle of that, and we have an example here with the right Jaeger MP44s. This is another 12-man squad with the assault rifles, the MP44, but the range is only 300 meters. And these units are actually really hard to use well because at long range, so at 500 meters or more, they just have 3 rifles. They will not do well there. And at very short range, 100 meters, they do have 2 submachine guns. But the MP44 is weaker than submachine guns at 100-meter range, and it cannot fire past 300 meters. So at the longer range, at the line infantry range, it loses. And at the CQC infantry range, the 100-meter range, it also loses. But at this magical this magical zone of 100 to 300 meters, this unit can absolutely tear other units up. Tear them up, annihilate them, turn them into mush. But it's a 200-meter range that you have to work within to get these to do their special thing. That's really hard to find. Most of the time you can find that either within towns where there's a 200 or 300-meter range between some buildings, or in light forests, or sometimes you will have 2 patches of heavy forest separated by some light forest. And a good use for these units is you can put them on the edge of the heavy forest. Any infantry that try to cross the light forest will encounter these at that 300 to 200-meter range, and they'll be gone in a very short few seconds. Your opponents, I mean, not your infantry unit. So they work really well, but it's very conditional, very hard to find a good use for them. Now, if you want to use them in an infantry tab like Gruppe Harteneck has, okay, I think we could probably find 1 slot free to throw these in, and without losing too much of the necessary things. But just remember that using units that have these kind of conditional requirements requires you to pay more attention to the game. And that means you also have to look more carefully, and you have to place your units carefully. And if we go back to that example of the 2 heavy forests with the light forest in between, where this is a perfect situation for these units, this is still a kind of lying in ambush kind of situation. But What happens if the battle moves away from there to an area where there is no 300, 200 meter, perfect engagement range for these units? Then it becomes very difficult to use them again, and you either have to just leave them behind, in which case the points are wasted, or you have to look carefully, you have to micro them, you have to move them around, you have to find a special location for them, and that's going to take up time and micro from you. It's going to take up your attention, and Steel Division 2 is already a very taxing game mentally when we play it normally. When we add in these extra units that require us to do even more work, we can both waste time but also make it more draining on ourselves. So most of the time, I actually avoid taking these MP44s, but I'm not saying that they can't be used, that they can't be very effective, just that doing so has some extra requirements, in my opinion. So then we go back to this. What do we want to throw into the infantry tab for A phase? It's going to be line infantry, and it's going to be C2C infantry, at least one card of each. So looking at this, first what I would do is I would have a browse through all of the units in the infantry tab here, and I would check, okay, what kind of line infantry does the division have and how many of them, okay? So let's go through. We have the S, the S at Truppen, okay, disheartened, nice quantity, cheap price, not great at fighting. Grenadier DPs, they have the DP-28. This is a 9-man squad. We have these Husarok. Forgive my pronunciation, I'm not Hungarian. I've never spoken any Hungarian in my life. This is a very nice squad. It has an LMG. It has 16 men. It's very high strength for the squad. And they come with anti-tank grenades too. 25 points is pretty reasonable for a 16-man squad. This is a very nice line infantry squad. Okay, I'm gonna put a pin in this one. I quite like this one. We've got these Hussar. Yeah, well, I'm not going to pronounce that, am I? Let's call these guys the Gollies. So these Gollies have 16 men, again, just like the Husarok over here, but they have 3 light machine guns. Very strong, but then we can also see that they are 5 points more, 30 points for each squad, and they have lower availability, only 6 if we bring them in A, and they are limited to being brought in either A or B phase, but a very, very strong squad. And then we also have the Panzer Grenadiers here at the very bottom, who are 30 points, 10-man squad, and come with 2 MG42s. Now, as in real life, light machine guns made by different companies, different manufacturers, are not made equal. The MG42 is one of the best light machine guns in the game. And so having 2 of them on an infantry squad makes that infantry squad pretty good. Now, the other thing I notice here when I look at the deployment phases is that actually it's only available in A phase. So I have to take it in A phase, and if I'm trying to separate my line infantry or what line infantry I have available to myself across 3 phases, A, B, and C, this one's only available in A, so that means probably I can work it around so that the other line infantry go into either A, B, and C. So we'll throw this one into A. We'll have a look at its transport options. It can come with a half track if we so desire. Half track also has another MG42 on it. However, this would then take the price of each squad to 40 points each, and most of the time I would avoid taking half tracks for infantry in A phase because, specifically looking at deployment, the basic idea that I apply is that we try to place the essential things we need on the map. Now, line infantry is something essential. Half tracks do not go into that essential label. Depending on if we're going for a specific kind of tactic, they can become essential. But if we're looking at the very basics, how we look at the game as a beginner, half tracks don't go into the essential category. Line infantry do. So we're going to save ourselves 10 points per squad. And if that's for 9 squads, that's going to be 90 points we save. And we still get our 9 infantry squads out, but we're saving 90 points in doing so. So we'll take them in the Opal Blitz, and we'll add that to the battle group. So then we have to look at how are we going to split the Grenadier DP. Now these actually have higher quantity available than the other units. Let's say the standard quantity per card for infantry tends to be around 9 for A phase. And we see that with the Panzer Grenadiers here. These guys actually have 12, which is really nice, and they're only 20 points. And being so cheap, being such an essential unit, and having that extra availability actually bumps up their value for me in terms of priority for going into A phase. That would be really useful, I think. So let's see if we throw these into A phase, and then we'll have a look at the other two we have left for B and C phase. These guys can only come in B phase, and these guys can also only come in B phase. Now, we might have a slight problem here. If we're looking at trying to make a C phase, or sorry, not a C phase, a balanced deck, then having infantry in C phase is of course imperative. Balanced is strongest in C phase. We kind of tend to build our divisions around the income type we choose. This one I'm just looking at balanced. So that means we want line infantry being absolutely essential at all phases. We want line infantry in C phase. We need line infantry in C phase. No exceptions. I will not accept any excuses about that. So then we probably need to go back and change something, because at the moment these two squads we have left can come at maximum in B phase. Okay, that's not great for us. Can't change the Panzer Grenadier. They only have A phase availability. The Grenadier DP can come in C phase, so we're gonna have to do this. And when we look, we actually get 36 of these in C phase at 0 vet. If we change to 1 vet, we can bring 24. Now, I would say it's up to you, whichever one you would want to choose here. Both can work pretty well. Having 36 infantry squads available in C phase from one card is actually really, really nice if it's going to be a quite long game, or if your strategy is like, let's say, an attrition style strategy, then this is really nice. If you would prefer to go for something like overwhelming your opponent with stronger units in C phase, then you might want to consider upvetting, because you'd still get 24 squads, okay? If we calculate that, that's going to come to what, 480 points in C phase. That's not that much, actually. So let's try it. Let's throw in the Grenadier DP in C phase. We'll have 36 of them. We're pretty much guaranteed to not run out, which is another nice thing here. So then we're going to have to look again at A phase. Most of the time, my basic building strategy would be at least 2 cards of line infantry for A phase, at least. We can work around it with various other tools within a division, but if we're looking at the basics and trying to get those down, then let's just do it this way. There's so much customizability within Steel Division 2. There are so many different ways to do things that, anyone experienced with the game could look at what I'm saying and say, well, no, actually, you can do it like this. Oh, no, that's not right. You could actually just do it like this. Yeah, I know there are lots of different ways to do it, but trying to look at the absolute basics and a simple way to get let's say a solid foundation and start practicing with that. And then once you get more experienced, feel free to change things up, and that's going to be something I talk about a little bit later in terms of practicing and changing things. But we'll get to that. So then, going back, I want another card of line infantry for A phase. Now, the Ersatz Truppen now is becoming a possibility, even though I don't like them. But let's have a look at our other two options, the Husarok and the Gullies. Now, if I were to combine the Gullies into A phase with the Panzer Grenadiers, we would have the squads that have two MG42s and the squads that have three of the solo third LMGs. So two very good MGs and three MGs. Very, very strong 750-meter range line infantry. Okay, so they would be fantastic at those kinds of ranges for doing that kind of thing. The issue is that the Gullies are a really nice unit. 16-man squad with 3 LMGs. It's just so nice. So nice. Hard to find such a nice kind of infantry unit within the game. And so bringing them in B phase, where we can bring 6 more of them, especially if we're thinking of we're playing a balanced income type, we're going for that longer kind of game. Having more of them for that purpose starts to be a little bit attractive. So let's have a look. Let's try. Let's throw these guys in B phase. Let's have a look at the Husarok. Now in B phase, 18 and 12 would be 30 squads. It's going to be about 700 and something points. That's about half of our total points for B phase if we're playing balanced, where we get 1,350 points for those 10 minutes. Now, again, I'm going to say that we want more units most of the time than we would actually use, so that we have options available. Sometimes we are going to want a lot of infantry, and we can make use of a lot of infantry, and sometimes we can't so much, but having those options available most of the time is going to be useful. Now, if we don't think that we could put 30 infantry units to use, something we could consider doing is upvetting, and instead bringing these Husarok at 1 vet, where we still get 12 of them, but they're overall going to be stronger. They're going to have better accuracy, better resistance to suppression. I think they also get damage resistance even with veterancy. So that's something we could consider doing here. Now, between bringing this Husarok unit in A or B phase, I would say probably both could work. It depends on how you like to play as well. And that's going to tie into some advice I'm going to give later about testing things and making changes. But for now, let's just say this is going to be an infantry heavy deck. So we'll throw these guys into B phase, and we'll keep that 1 vet. And then we'll also throw the Ersatztruppen into A phase. Even though I don't like them, they can still hold the line, and we do have 9 of these Panzer Grenadiers anyway, who can do the hard work, shall we say. So this is the line infantry done. This is the essential, the backbone to the army. So now we're going to also need some CQC infantry for every phase. And CQC infantry we have available here would be the Stosstrup, the Reitjäger, and the Jäger Pioneers. And we recognize CQC infantry by submachine guns or special weapons such as grenades. Here, 2 frag HE shells, this is an explosive, or Molotov cocktails, flamethrowers also work. So what we can do is we could take these Stosstrup in A phase. They have to come with 1 vet, but we would get 6 of them. Now I would say 6 is probably not enough. So we have actually an option to complement this outside of the infantry tab. And if we jump over to the support tab, no, we don't actually have it. Okay, I take it back. Usually most divisions will have the 2-man flamethrower in the support tab, and we can use those to support our CQC advances, attacks, whatever you'd like to call it. Gruppe Harteneck doesn't have that, so we would probably have to throw in some right Jaegers in A phase too. They don't have special CQC weapons, so what we might consider doing is if we upvet them and we get 6 of them, and then we combine these 2 units together. So anytime we're going to send CQC infantry, we send one of each. We send Stostrup and we send the right Jaeger. Now the right Jaeger have a 12-man squad, pretty beefy. So what we could do is sending both of these squads, Stostrup only has 5-man squad, pretty weak, easy to die, but they have the Molotov cocktails. So join these 2 things together and send the right Jaeger and the Stostrup together, but the right Jaeger in front. That way, any grenades that get thrown, any Molotov cocktails that get thrown, any flamethrowers that get fired, the right Jaeger is going to take those hits, and then the Stostrup can come in and still effectively throw their special weapon, the Molotov cocktail, without being instantly blown up or suppressed or what have you. And so we can make it work in that way. And then we can throw the Jaeger Pioneers, who have the grenades. These also work as line infantry too. We see that they have 8 rifles, the semi-auto G43, and they have an MG42 as well in a 10-man squad. So they also fulfill the line infantry role reasonably well. So we could throw these into B phase. And most of the time we're going to avoid veterancy on these units because we're using them for their grenades, and grenades don't change in any way with veterancy. So we can choose. We have 8 squads with grenades, or we have 10 squads with grenades. It's always going to be 10. And then we'll throw another another card into C phase. And here we have it. Here's a basic division build for a balanced income type for infantry. We have our line infantry, the core, the skeleton. We have the CQC infantry for those short ranges, and we have enough of both to last us well through C phase, I would hope, especially with 36 of the Grenadier DP. We still have one card left here for 3 points that we could potentially throw a leader unit into if we felt like doing that. Certainly worth considering, but as it's not essential, then what I would do from here is then move on to looking at the other parts of the division first. So after the after the infantry tab is done, then we can really look at any of the other tabs. I'm not really personally inclined to look at any of them as they are all fairly essential. But what I would do is I would look first at the cheaper costs where we see it's only 1 point. Of course, anti-air is essential anyway. And we fill in the necessary parts for our A phase and deployment. So let's have a look at infantry. Sorry, brain isn't working at the moment. Let's look at Recon. And when we're thinking about Recon for A phase, a lot of the time we will encounter the same kinds of situations. And those situations would be something like a hill where a recon unit can get a nice sideline over the opponent's lines. We might find a nice tall building, such as a church or a windmill, and they also allow recon units or any units in them to see over things, although it won't actually show you when you press the C key. They allow you to see over things, and so often putting a recon unit into those buildings can give you really valuable information. And so the unit that we tend to use for this purpose would just be these 2-man recon squads, the Aufklärer. So it's up to us. We can bring 4 with no vet, we can bring 3 with 1 vet, or 2 with a double vet, and the veterancy does actually increase their ability to see further and see more things, to kind of pierce the stealth stat of other units. So it's worth considering having some veterancy, but I would say it comes down in some ways to personal experience, personal preference. If you play a lot and you realize that you never use more than two of the Aufklärer, you might as well bring them at double vet to get those nice bonuses. Whereas if you use two and you're playing and you wish you had two more for two other locations, then change it down to no vet and bring four. But this is something really where you have to practice for yourself. So I'll just throw these in for A phase. And in terms of Gruppe Harteneck as well, we also have this nice Recon vehicle, which can only come in A phase, has a nice auto cannon, and being a Recon tank, it has the ability to spot infantry that are hiding in buildings and forests, and it has a very nice anti-infantry gun as well. So this is a pretty nice support vehicle, so I'll throw that in as well. Jump over to the tank tab. And so for Gruppe Hartneck especially, and actually for almost any division, the deployment phase, most of the time, we're going to want to take cheaper units rather than expensive units. And the reason for that is we're looking to cover our bases against different unit types. If you bring a, let's say, 160 point tank, if you bring, say, a Panther, okay, in deployment, then you will be able to control a large open area against enemy tanks very well. But you're going to have less points elsewhere on the map. And that Panther is not going to suppress infantry very well, especially not at that kind of range. It just doesn't do or perform that role very well. So every time we put more points into one unit, that kind of lessens our strength on the rest of the map. So in deployment, most of the time, again, this is just like at the basic level, we want cheaper units rather than expensive units. And so the T-34-76, although this says the T-34-42, is a fantastic deployment and A-phase tank because it's so cheap. It's 60 points. This one is limited to A phase as well. But what we can do with this tank is, having reasonable penetration and reasonable armor, this can perform a variety of roles. It can support infantry, it can destroy half-tracks, it can destroy recon vehicles, it can destroy light tanks, and it can go toe-to-toe with medium tanks and win, and it can flank heavy tanks and destroy them that way as well. So it can do a lot for its cheap price, and it's pretty fast as well. It's got 49, well, let's just say 50 kilometers an hour road speed, so it gets to where you want to go pretty fast. So in terms of being able to exert influence in multiple areas with less points, then cheaper medium tanks do that role very well. And so in deployment phase, T-34-76 is pretty damn good. So I'll throw these into A phase. But then we might want to consider something like, okay, they perform this multi-variety role really well, but what about the kind of longer range engagements? If your opponent has T-34-85s, if you want to, say, take out Shermans without going toe-to-toe, which becomes a somewhat a 50-50, and that's not the best kind of engagement. You could overcome with numbers, bring two T-34-76s, or instead of spending 120 points for two of these tanks, you could instead bring a Stug, which has the longer range of 1750. It has the better penetration of 135 millimeters, has the same armor as the T-34-76, but working at that longer range, that armor can actually do more for it. So this tank then can counter some of the other tanks that maybe the T-34-76 would not be able to. So the Stug 3 is also a nice option for A phase. Okay, so we'll throw one of those in as well. And then we start thinking about, okay, that's that kind of multi-cheap roll done. That's the medium tanks counter kind of done with the Stug 3. What are the other things my opponent could bring? What if my opponent brings Panthers or Tigers or something like that? Then we also have tigers available, but tiger versus tiger is a little bit sketchy, I would say. So we'll put that on the back burner for now, and we'll think about that. What I would definitely do is consider throwing some stooks into B phase. Again, we're gonna have the same thing going on here. And if we just kind of spitball, shall we say, we'll throw some tigers into B, and we'll throw some tigers into C. This is not, let's say, a finalized idea. We're just saying, okay, we're thinking A phase some things, B phase some things, C phase some things, and if that's too expensive, if we want to change some things out and we could think of a better way to do it, we'll go back, we'll take them out. So let's look at the support tab. Now, in terms of A phase, again, looking at what's cheap, first thing that pops out to me here are the Panzer III Ns. Now, these would do pretty much the same thing that we could use the T-34-76 for, and they have pretty reasonable armor, 70 frontal armor. The AP shells are not amazing, okay? 55 millimeters of penetration. Heat shells are pretty good, but 1250 range. So these, they can work, okay? But they work better at the closer range. Unfortunately, we can only get 3 of them at one vet, which is not amazing, but very cheap. Only 40 points. And especially in the deployment stage. Now, if you consider that both you and your opponent only have 750 points, okay? 750 points. Okay. 5% of that, or 10% of that is going to be 75 points. Okay? And then 5% of that is going to be like 37 points. So if you can save 30 points achieving the same thing that your opponent achieves, and by that I mean achieving some armored support for your infantry, then you're doing it more efficiently than they did. And you have those extra points to put somewhere else to gain a different kind of advantage somewhere else. So if we can support our infantry with a Panzer III, where our opponent can only support their infantry with, say, a Sherman, which is 80 points, then we're achieving the same end for half the price. So that's also something worth considering. I think a lot of the time it's easy to forget that from minute 1, both sides have exactly the same amount of points. You might load into a game and you see that you have balanced income, your opponent has Vanguard income, and you think, oh no, he's got the advantage now in A phase, absolutely. And so right from deployment, you start playing very defensively because you think, he's Vanguard, I'm balanced, he has 140 points per minute and I only have 110. Even after 1 minute, your opponent will only have 30 points more than you. That's after 1 minute. After 2 minutes, 60. 3 minutes, 90. 90 points is almost nothing. That's after 3 minutes. I mean, Vanguard is not that strong anymore compared to what it used to be, but the point is, remember that from deployment, both players are equal regardless of income. Once you reach 10, 12, 15 minutes, okay, the different income types start to become more apparent. But before then, we don't need to adjust how we play so much. We don't need to game ourselves, I would say. So let's throw these guys into A phase. Now the Stu 42 is a very nice support gun. It's called an assault gun. It has this nice 2-kilometer range. And so we only have 2 options. We can bring it in A phase, we can bring it in B phase. And for this one, I would say this comes down to personal preference and your own kind of strategy that you have in your head. Would you like to have more offensive and defensive 2-kilometer range capabilities against things like anti-tank guns, against infantry in A phase, or would you rather have 2 more of them available in B phase, but you have to go through these 10 minutes without that kind of capability? There are advantages and disadvantages to both. And so this is, again, coming back to this idea of You have to play, or you have to build a deck, even if it's not amazing. You have to build a deck. You have to play with the deck, and you have to play against many different kinds of opponents, many different kinds of divisions and deck builds, and see how it does, and watch the replay. You watch the replay, and you should actually, in my opinion, watch the replay more than once. Watch the replay in neutral, so that you can see from both sides what's happening and how things progress, and look at in terms of unit versus unit combat and things like that. And then also watch the replay again from your opponent's perspective, and see what your opponent sees, how your opponent reacts to that, and how your opponent sees your units advancing, coming out of the fog of war, and how they affect what he does. And doing both of those things, I find, is a really great way to learn more about both your strategy in the game as you play, but also the units that you have, what they can do, when they are useful, when they might be more useful if you had them available at a different stage. So if this is a balanced deck, I think what I would do is I would probably throw these into B phase. And for my longer range support kind of things, we do have MG42s here, which are very nice. So I'll throw some of these into A phase. We can upvet them and only lose one, which I think is pretty nice. 4 of them sounds nice. And a supply truck in B tends to be a pretty standard um, support necessity in almost every division, so I throw that in without even really thinking. I'll have a look at the anti-tank tab. Now the anti-tank tab, when we think about deployment and anti-tank guns, what we're doing is we're thinking for any kind of open area or road that we can get a nice sight line down, we want to have some options to take out enemy tanks. Now, anti-tank guns are essential and different from tanks. You can't just fill this tab with the Marders and the Jagdpanzer Hetzer here, although it is a very nice vehicle, because they don't do the same thing. Vehicles can and will be destroyed in one shot. Anti-tank guns, that's very unlikely to happen. Tanks are very easy to spot and will be spotted very easily. Anti-tank guns hidden in a forest will not be. And so what that allows you to do is, with anti-tank guns, you can very often have the first shot, if not 2 shots, before the opposing vehicle or tank that you're trying to destroy has any opportunity to react or fire back. When you're using a tank, that's often not the case. They can often spot each other at the same range and begin engaging at the same time, or you might get one shot off first, maybe. Anti-tank guns is different. They are very well hidden. And actually now, thanks to some of the changes in some of the recent patches, sometimes these anti-tank guns, if your opponent's vehicles are not supported with infantry or recon that are able to spot far enough, these anti-tank guns can remain hidden, and I mean totally unrevealed, not even appearing to your opponent for 2 or 3 shots. So the only way your opponent can see that something is happening here is if they have the eyesight of a hawk and the presence of mind, the game sense, to actually see the armor-piercing rounds flying through the air from this forest, because no unit will be revealed, no unit card will pop up. And the lower the caliber of the gun, the more likely that is to happen. So with the 45 mil, for example here, this has a much higher chance of, say, being completely unrevealed, even firing 3 shots in a row. The Pack 40 has less of a chance, but it can still do it. If your opponent does support their vehicles with Recon, however, that's less likely to happen. But still, the point is, having anti-tank guns and being able to hide them means that you have an advantage in being able to get first shots off. And so defensively, they are far, far superior to vehicles. Far, far, far superior. Vehicles are much harder to hide. Can be done, but it generally requires maneuvering as well. Anti-tank guns you can hide without having to do something extra. And that again comes into, the idea of this is a taxing game, and I don't know about you, but I feel pretty tired after playing it for a while, especially playing against people. So having to do less, I find, makes the game easier and allows you to also spend your time in a more functional ways, shall we say. So having anti-tank guns is necessary. Now the other thing we'll want to consider is we'll want some anti-tank guns that will take out medium tanks. Will. Because a lot of divisions have medium tanks. Most of the time you will see medium tanks. People will bring medium tanks in deployment. I recommended the T-34-76, for example. They're a solid choice, and so medium tanks being such a solid choice means anti-tank guns that can take out medium tanks are also a very solid choice. So, what do we have available in Gruppe Harteneck? Now we have the 45 mil, but the penetration is a bit lacking, 75 millimeters. Not gonna have a great time shooting at the front of medium tanks with this gun. Flanking them, yes, but again, that requires a bit of micro. Let's have a look at the 76 millimeter here. Has 105 penetration, and that is with 1500 meter range. This is reasonable, but armor piercing shell penetration drops off the further they fire. So it might say 105 millimeters of penetration, but firing at 1500 meters, that's going to go down. And what that means is against most medium tank armor of, let's say, 90 millimeters, you're going to have a bit of RNG, a bit of some dice rolls regarding whether this gun actually penetrates. And when we take into account things like accuracy and missing. So if we take this at no vet, 45% accuracy, probably you're going to miss the first shot, okay? So we fire and we miss. Let's say the second time we fire and we hit, okay? It's not guaranteed to happen, but let's say it happens. You hit, but you don't penetrate. You fire again and you hit, but you don't penetrate again. Okay, you fired 3 times, guaranteed to have your gun, revealed. And now the enemy tank probably is firing back because it's only 1500 meter range. You fire again and get a penetration, but it's only 8 damage. The tank isn't dead. You fire again and it bounces. Okay, this is not that unlikely to happen. Okay, so you fired 5 times. Okay, and it says the rate of fire is 10 rounds a minute. That's been 30 seconds of firing. You still haven't killed one tank. Not great, right? Not great. So then the Pack 40 tends to be a really nice choice for that anti-medium role from deployment in A phase because the AP shells are 145 millimeters of penetration and it has 1750 range. And so a lot of the time it is going to penetrate medium tanks and you're not going to be waiting so long. And even when the RNG is bad, it's not going to be that bad using this gun. Whereas with the lower caliber guns, you could have a really bad time. Not guaranteed. It could penetrate and hit, or hit and penetrate on its first 2 hits. And Bob is your uncle, as they say. But when you get those bad situations, you will be, I would say, in the least a little bit frustrated. So it's something we have to bear in mind, I would say. Now we could go for something like, we take this one in A phase, and we also take this one in A phase, and we take the Pack 40 in B. Now we could do that. Now, there are a lot of other good options here for Gruppe Harteneck, especially Panzerschrecks being a indispensable unit most of the time, and the Jagdpanzer Hetzer also being a fantastic tank. then what we might look at here is we might say, okay, well, the the Pack 40 is amazing, okay, and it's going to only three in A phase, only three in deployment, is going to allow me to at least place down three anti-tank guns in certain locations where I can feel fairly confident that it's going to do its job without me having to stare at it bouncing and missing enemy tanks and dying and wasting the points I spent on it for nothing. Pack 40, we feel confident we can place it down and it will do the thing we want it to do. But then we only have three, and we understand that maybe something about the play style of Gruppe Harteneck requires that we use vehicles for our anti-tank role more so than actual anti-tank guns. Now, I did say anti-tank guns in many ways are better, and that is true, but not every division is made equal, and so we kind of have to change how we do things. Every division, tends to have its kind of unique um, unicorns and special things is do, little changes in the way the division is built, the units that are available, and so on and so forth. So if we did say then take the Pack 40 in A, we could have a look. Let's have a look at this. The Marder 1 has the same gun. It also has a Pack 40 gun, okay? The Marder 3 has 130 millimeters of penetration. That's pretty good at 1,500 meter range. So what if this is 35 points? Can only come in A phase. Pack 40 is 60 points. Has pretty good range. But what if we substituted? What if we instead took Marder ones in A phase as well? We can get 4 of these. And we can even still try to hide these units in light forest, where they can remain unrevealed reasonably well in some cases. So we could still use these as the same thing as the Pack 40, just in a different kind of way. It's 10 points cheaper, and we get one more of them actually as well. And then in total, we would have 7 units for our kind of anti-medium, anti-light tank capabilities to place around the map during A phase and deployment. I would say that's probably pretty reasonable. Now the Jagdpanzer is a beautiful tank. I love it. Fantastic availability in A. Great stats, 105 armor. The Pack 40 gun, although it's the Pack 39L/48, but it has the same 145 millimeters of penetration, same range of 1750. The 105 frontal armor means that it will bounce a lot of other medium tanks reasonably well as well. So this is a great anti-medium vehicle. So we could also throw one of these into A, although we might not buy it in deployment. It's still nice to have if we needed to perform that role. So we'll throw one of these in A. We'll also throw some in B as well. And the reason for that is we could use them all up in A, and then we would also probably want to use them in B. We might not use them in A, but then the B would still be available and would still roll over to C8, and then for 12 would probably be enough to get us through the game. It's not the only unit we're going to use. And then for good measure, we'd probably also throw some Panzerschrecks into A phase, because they're a very nice unit overall. So then when we look at this, and this is not finalized, this is basics, and we say, okay, there's still three more tabs here. We have 10 points to spend. It's a little bit close. We could spend 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 6, 8, 10. So we could do 2 anti-air, 3 artillery, and 3 air units. But probably this air tab, let's have a quick look. Usually the longer the air tab, the nicer the units they have, but we'll see. So 1 unit of fighter is pretty basic in A phase. 4 of them, okay, fine. And the reason I'm choosing the BF-109 G6 over the E4 is 70 kilometers faster speed, okay, and better guns. Now it might be 35 points more. But if you buy the BF-109E4, and because of its 520 kilometer speed, it can't catch the unit you want it to shoot down, well, then it's a total waste. So generally having fighters that have up to or around 600 kilometers speed tends to be pretty necessary. Feel free to try the E4, and once you use them and can't catch the thing you want to shoot down, and then your fighters get shot down by enemy AA, and you feel really angry, you can come back to this and say, okay, I see what you mean. We also have the G-6R6, and this has even more guns, which is nice. But if we have a look at the difference, it is also only 560 kilometers an hour, and it is 15 points more for being that much slower. Now it does have the gun pods, it does do so much damage. It is definitely, I would say, an option. So between these two, the G6 and the G6R6, I would say both are reasonably good. Probably the G6 performs better in the role we want it to, especially in terms of speed, but the G6R6 can definitely work. And then the other things we have available here are these HE-111 heavy bombers. Actually, these are really nice. I used Gruppe Harteneck in a 10v10 recently. The video for that is somewhere, maybe on Twitch. But this bomber with the 8 250 kg bombs is so nice, and is so good at taking out soft targets. Is fantastic at taking out clumped infantry. If you're having a big infantry fight in a heavy forest or in a town, and you bring this bad boy in, say bye-bye to your opponent's units, or at least they're all going to be damaged and pinned down for you to mop up. So this division doesn't have any cheap, medium, or light bombers for A phase. So I'd say bringing at least one of these in A phase is gonna do you some good. The other one has two 1000 kg bombs. Now these are, I mean, these bombs land accurately and anything is dead, essentially. There's nothing going to survive this. So this is a annihilator. This is a nemesis to pretty much anything. Bring them in B phase, we get 2. Bring them in C phase, we could get 4. Now I'd say there's probably some room for customization here. If we say we throw one of these in C, one of these in B phase, then we have some bombers available in every phase. This is going to be a balanced income, right? And the reason that we absolutely want to have at least one bomber in A phase is, again, this idea of tools. Because if you do have this big infantry fight, and your opponent has 8 infantry squads all placed in a pretty little line, and you think, wow, if I had 8 250 kg bombs for this, that would just be amazing. That would make my day. And you go to your air tab and you click and you see fighters and no bombers, and you slap yourself in the face and you say, God damn it. And then after that match, you will go back to your deck and you will edit it and you will put one of these bombers into A phase, because although that situation might not always happen, might not happen that often, when it does happen and you have the suitable tool available to deal with it, that's when you can get a big advantage, and that's when you can have also a lot of fun. So looking at the different tools available, we think about the situations that might appear, and I find it's helpful to think, if I didn't have this and this situation appeared, how annoyed would I be? And in this case, with these bombers and these juicy targets, I've been there. I've played the game a lot. I've been there. I know how sad it is. And so now I don't make those mistakes anymore. In terms of the ME410, the tank buster, it's hard to use these well. It's hard to find a good situation to use these, and they are expensive. So if you lose it and you don't get a lot of use out of it, you can feel a little bit annoyed. Whereas the bombers, as long as the bombs reasonably land near something, you're going to get some value out of it by comparison. So let's have a quick dab into the anti-air tab. Now this is pretty awful, shall we say. Pretty damn awful anti-air tab. We get the flak 3820s. Do they come? Okay, good. They can come with the flak half track. Now what we might consider here is, we might want to consider, if this can come with the flak half track, can we get through a phase with no anti-air? Most of the time, yes. Most of the time, yes. Most of the time, your opponent is not going to buy so many planes in a phase because there's such a large requirement placed upon both players to have so many different unit types across the map, and the map is big. And so, to fulfill all these necessary things we need on the map, if your opponent is spending a lot of points on planes, then there will be some very weak point on the map. Or maybe all of it will be weak. Because when you spend 500 points on planes, that's 500 points less on the ground. And so somewhere your opponent's units are going to be lacking. So most of the time, your opponent won't spend that many points on planes. And if they do, you can take advantage of it, and you should take advantage of it. So then can we throw this unit into B phase? And the reason I was thinking about that is then at least we can bring it a lot of them, 90 points. And we could even bring the SDKFZ 7-1 as well. But we might be able, I mean, if we consider this and this, that's actually 2 units in one. We can bring 9 of them. That would be 18 flak guns that we could have on the map as long as they're not getting killed. 18 flak guns is pretty good. And you don't have to place them all together. You could use the flak half track to drop off the 20 mil somewhere else, and then relocate the half track to a different part of the map. That is also something you could do. It might take some time to do so, but it is doable. You could, in some ways, use the flak 38s as your stationary anti-air in certain parts of the map, and then take 5 of your flak half tracks and use them to support an armored push on a different part of the map. Because they're very mobile, they can be used to do that, and we can use the more stationary aspect of the 20 mils to do the stationary thing, right? So we don't have to bring these in, but these are very, very nice anti-aircraft guns. Now we could even do it a different way. We could throw the flak into A, like this, and throw these into B. And then we've got one point to spend on artillery. Now there are some reasonable artillery options here, and a lot of the time something like the mortars and the off-map unit especially is very valuable. So then we will go back and we'll say, okay, what have I spent points on here that maybe is not super necessary? And I would probably look at something like the tanks. Probably we could do something like take out either the Stugs from B, and that would get us another 3 points, giving us 4 activation points total to spend. Or we could switch it around a different way, and we could say, okay, I'm going to take the Tigers out of B. I'll put some Stugs in B2. Now I'm going to put these at 0 vet, and that way some of their quantity will carry over into C phase if I need that. But we also have the Jagdpanzer Hetzers in B, don't we? So then are these Jagdpanzer Hetzers able to fulfill the role that the Stug would fill? And then so do we need the Stug? Can we maybe even take this out and say, actually, in B phase for my anti-armor needs, I'm just going to use the Jagdpanzer Hetzer. I'm going to bring Tigers in C phase because I'm balanced income. I get a lot of points in C phase, and until C phase, maybe Hetzers can take care of business for me. Maybe. Maybe. So if we take that out and we have a little play around with the points now, we look at artillery. Most of the time, we will be able to find some use for a mortar in A phase. Now, recently, I've actually been considering taking the 120 millimeter version instead because although the 81 millimeter is okay and it's only 60 points, just okay sometimes is closer to mediocre than to reasonable, if that makes sense. Whereas the 120 millimeter mortar team, when these 120 millimeter shells hit something, that thing is hurt. When the 81 millimeter shell hits something, it's not really so hurt. It does a little bit of something, damages it a little bit, suppresses it a little bit. Maybe it makes your opponent say, okay, I've got to kind of retreat this thing here. When the 120 millimeter hits, things can die, and your opponent doesn't have any opportunity to make the thing retreat because it's already gone. So let's say for experiment's sake, we throw the 120 millimeter mortar into A phase. Now the off-map units are one of the best units in the entire game. Very, very strong, but they work best against clumps of units. And most of the time, your opponent is only going to have this build-up, this clump of units as the game has progressed. In A phase, the front line tends to be fairly sparsely populated with the essentials. And unless you're going for some kind of big A phase push, you probably get more value out of these off-map artillery units from B phase and onwards. So if we just throw this one into B phase, we would actually get 2 of them. We can bring twice as many. We still have 4 points left to spend here. We could bring the Morza 210, and this is a ridiculously huge gun. Has to be brought with the supply truck. And if we bring it in C phase, at 190 points, it's unlikely that we would want to buy more than 2 of these, I would say, from personal experience. And at double vet, it does have a nice rate of fire bonus. The accuracy is pretty good. It does have a radio as well. So if we take these in C phase, because we got that 1 point, we also have another single activation point here. And then we would have 2 more points, 2 more activation points to spend. So what we might do is, we might say, okay, maybe my Aufklärer get killed in A, and I just bring something else in B phase to replace them, okay? And so if we look at B phase, the 2 other infantry units we have here, the reason I'm not going to bring the Aufklärer is the Aufklärer are very cheap, but it's only 2 strength. We could, for 5 more points, bring a 4 strength squad, and in B phase, we could even get 4 of them at double vet. That double vet is going to increase the recon capabilities, increase their damage resistance, and they're already twice as healthy as well. So we could throw these in and we say, okay, that's going to be our backup recon units. We have 2 more points left. And then we might say, okay, well, actually, now that I think about it, maybe these Hetzers, as amazing as they are, would not actually do everything I want for me in B phase. Maybe if I want to utilize a 2-kilometer range, I might be able to get use out of Tigers in B phase. I might even consider bringing 2 Tiger leaders in B phase, because it's unlikely that I'm going to buy a lot of Tigers in B phase. If I do buy one, it would be nice if it came at 1 vet and had the leader trait, so we could also buff the other units around it. If we have the Tiger leader next to the Hetzers, for example, and those Hetzers are also going to perform better as well. And then we spend exactly 50 activation points, and we have, I would say, a reasonable lineup for a balanced battle group. We have a bit of everything. We have tools available to us in every phase, and we've considered the balance of units and also the balance of income according to how much or how many points we would have available to us at each stage of the game, having those 750 in A, but also having to account for all of the points we would get in A phase as well. So in this case, up to 1850 points. Then we have 1350 in B, and C phase can go on forever, so we would actually need something more like quantity available in our C phase. And so we've got plenty of infantry. We've got the Tigers as well. And if we just turn off the B phase here, we'd see that in C phase we have 51 infantry units. That's quite a lot, and that's it's definitely going to last you for a long time. 8 Tigers, and that's going to be about 1,000 points of tanks. That's pretty good as well. We got 2 very heavy artillery units coming up to 400 points worth. Most of the time, this is going to be a luxury unit, but if we have those points available, it's going to be nice. And we also have 4 of the 1000 kg bomber. So we have some very, we have definitely enough of the essentials in C phase, but we also have some nice tools to provide different options. Now this video is about the A phase, so let's have a look at that one as well. So in the Recon field, we have the infantry units that we can place into the forests or into the tall buildings or any building that has a nice line of sight. We have enough line infantry to cover all of our bases, both during deployment and throughout A phase. And we have also some CQC infantry to take care of those close quarters infantry fights. We have some cheap medium tanks, both the T-34-76 and the Panzer IIIN, which is even cheaper, to do that nice infantry support role, take out half-tracks, take out scout cars, things like that. But the T-34-76 also performs well in anti-medium and anti-light tank duties. We have the Stug 3 as a longer range anti-tank gun, and the Jagdpanzer Hetzer, a little bit more expensive, but can also do the same thing. We have the MG42, which allows us to place a unit with a very nice 1250, I think it is, range that can stop enemy infantry from being able to advance across open areas. And then we have the Pack 40 and the Marder 1 as our cheap defensive units with that nice range, with that reasonable accuracy and good penetration. And these we can use to hopefully safely protect ourselves from any advancing medium tanks. Panzerschrecks, of course, being almost an essential unit, very easy to hide in forests, in buildings, and if your opponent is silly enough to advance their own tanks close enough to a heavy forest or to a building, then you would hopefully have some of these Panzerschrecks ready to teach them a valuable lesson about why that is not a good idea. We took the Flak 38s in A, and they come with the Flak 38 half tracks, so 2 units in one. This allows us to spread out some anti-air if we need it. Now the anti-air tab for this division is not so great, but every division is different. We make do with what we can. Then for the artillery, we're going to take those 120mm mortars. Of course, you can substitute for the lower caliber. I've expressed my opinion on why I would prefer to take this one, although it is a little bit more expensive. And then in the air tab, we have the absolutely necessary fighter card and 1 bomber. At least 1 bomber. That way, at least, if the situation presents itself where we can use the bomber, it's there, and all we need then are the points available to buy it. And hopefully, the opponent doesn't have enough anti-air to prevent it from dropping its bombs. So that's really what we're looking at when we when we think about deployment and building our deck, of course, we can't build a division deck solely for a phase, well, unless you're trying to be really memey. But the reason I had to build the whole thing was because all of these things go together. There are multiple considerations when we are building the deck. So if we want to think about A phase, we also have to think about B phase and C phase. But here I am trying to place some focus on, what units we would think about bringing and why, and then the actual practical example in front of you of if I were to build a division using this division, build a division using this division, build a deck using this division, Gruppe Harteneck, then probably I would try something like this. And now the final part of this is that some good advice, I think, or some, I would say, even necessary advice for building good divisions in Steel Division 2 and understanding why they are good and why they work. One of the absolutely necessary parts is that if you think this is a good division or you build your own division deck and you think it's a good division, you then go and play with it. Okay? You play with it, you see how it goes, and you watch the replay. And maybe while you're playing, you've already made some notes to yourself that, okay, this didn't work, I needed this, or I didn't have this, or this worked really well, maybe I want more of this. Maybe you already have that while playing, but go and watch the replay and look at what went well, what didn't go well, and from that you can affect your buying decisions, but you can then also go back to your deck and change some things. For example, maybe you're playing and you really, really, really wanted some 2 kilometer range HE gun to take out some MGs or some anti-tank guns, and you just didn't have it available in A phase. You then might go back to the deck and say, okay, this Stu 42 here that I put in B phase, maybe let's try putting it in A phase instead. Maybe I get 2 less, but I also have them available 10 minutes earlier, and in that way I can prevent myself from losing some units, or I can give myself some advantage to gain or advance somewhere that I couldn't because I didn't have that kind of tool available. So absolutely make the deck, but don't just make it. Go and use it, practice with it, watch the replays. And as you watch the replays, just try and pick 1 or 2 things, both that you would change in the deck. So this is experimenting, absolutely experiment. Pick 1 or 2 things that you would change and go and change it and play again. And then repeat that. Watch the replay again and check those 2 things. Like, did they work out well for you? Or did you maybe just have no opportunity to use them? Okay, so play again. Try again. Try to use them, see how well they work. And this is how we learn. This is how we get better at the game. And this is how we then also build and customize division decks that actually really suit us, and we know why they suit us. We know why we want these things, and we know what to do with them. I can sit here all day and try to explain these things to you and give examples and so on, but there's no real replacement for first-hand experience. So that's gonna be it actually. I think I spent enough time explaining one division that explaining another division probably is not necessary at this stage, and I'm sure you can hear my voice is actually going a bit now. So I think that's going to be it for this video. Of course, I can always make another video at another stage um, with a different division, and we point out, what do we think are the strengths that would be good units and so on and so forth. But this is Gruppe Harteneck. This is looking at the division builder and what we might want to bring for A phase and deployment and why. Of course, connected to B and C phase because we can't separate them if we're honest. And yeah, I think we'll stop here. So that's it from me from Game Education. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it helped. and hope to see you next time.
Okay.